This is Love Your Villain, where we step into the arena and peel back the mask. The place we stop pretending we're okay and start getting curious about the parts we've been taught to hide. The angry, needy, jealous, anxious, avoidant, addicted, manipulative parts. The part that lashes out or shuts down, pushes love away, isn't broken. It's your story trying to speak. The villain you've been trying to silence is actually the part of you that needs the most love. Here, we don't shame the villain, we listen to it, get raw, intimate, and honest, while practicing being perfectly imperfect. I'm your host, Ella Kasman, and welcome to Love Your Villain.
Welcome back to Love Your Villain. This is episode 4, and today we're going to be talking about attachment styles. I think there's a lot of buzz around attachments, and I would love to give my take on my personal experience. And once I learned about my attachment styles, the question I asked myself, which I think a lot of people don't do, is, oh, I'm anxious, avoidant. What am I going to do about that? Do I want to be anxious and avoidant, or do I want to be secure? The answer to me was quite clear. I want to be secure. I don't want to be anxious. I don't want to be avoidant. So I embarked on a journey to learn how to primarily my anxiety, because I felt like anxious attachment is the most detrimental to me as an individual. Avoidance is detrimental to the person that you're in a relationship with. I'm going to be getting very clear about anxiety generally and then the avoidance, because for anyone who is anxious or avoidant, they're modes of survival. They are attachments that we formed to cope with our upbringing and the people that we grew up with. If you're no longer living in an environment where you're on high alert, then these attachments have been rendered useless. For many of us, though, we are still in relationships that are stimulating our survival mode. We develop attachment styles based on how we were treated as children. If you had avoidant or anxious caregivers, then you most likely will have formed an attachment style that was also either avoidant, anxious, or anxious avoidant. If you're brought up in a secure environment, you will grow into a secure human. Personally, I don't know anybody who was brought up in an environment where they were 100% secure. Sometimes it's not the parents, sometimes it's siblings. If you're a younger sibling who has been brought into a world where your older sibling wasn't super happy that you were born, then they're going to behave in a way toward you that might have been detrimental to your upbringing. The anxious attachment develops as the people pleaser, the child who must keep the peace. They are the peacekeeper. They don't like to rock the boat or stir up heavy emotions. They want everything just to be cool, calm, and collected. By doing that, they have learned to suppress their emotional experience because they worked out that the people they were cohabitating with couldn't handle it. They were already going through a lot. So the anxious person or the anxious child puts their needs last before the other members of the family. When an anxious person puts themselves last, it's called self-abandonment. And it means that they're telling their parents and their older sibling that their experience doesn't matter. The anxious person will suppress their emotional experience and it'll simmer until something else is triggered where it becomes a boil. The frequency of the boil and the energy within the system or the human body starts to become more shaky and unstable. And then once they've suppressed the boil, that leaves a very small amount of space for the boil to become an explosion. The anxious person can very easily go from a boil to explosion within a split second. If we are living in a state of stress that's around a 7, It will be very easy to go from a boil to an explosion like that. And the person on the receiving end of the explosion is usually quite taken back. They're like, what just happened? 1 minute, we're talking about the socks on the floor, and the next minute, you're losing it. I don't see how the socks on the floor is creating such a massive emotional response. But here's the deal. It's not the socks on the floor that has created the explosion. It's everything leading up to the socks on the floor. So if the anxious person has self-abandoned for the last 3 or 4 weeks of issues that have been coming up for them, but they haven't felt like they could talk about them to the people that really need to hear what their problems are, then the suppression will create the internal nervous system response, which is a simmer, the mild shake within the nervous system, turns into a boil, a stronger, higher frequency shake, and then it's the explosion. And the explosion is the problem, anxious people, because once you allow yourself to get to the explosion, it comes out in a very uncontrolled manner. That's someone throwing a cup against a wall, yelling, screaming, name calling, punching their hand through a wall. They're hurting somebody. They're not only emotionally abusive, but it can turn into violence. And it's not always violence on a person. It's violence on surrounding things. They can break things. They can smash things. They can explode. And explosion is where we don't want to be. No one wants to explode. What happens for the anxiously attached person is they actually get relief when the explosion happens. It's the lid off the pressure cooker has released. They say everything they've been wanting to say for the last 4 weeks in that moment, and it's freedom. For a moment, they get emotional freedom. They're like, thank God that's out. It's keeping the lid on the pressure that is so damaging to the anxious person. And the fact that they've been taught that their opinion doesn't matter, that their emotional experience doesn't matter, that no one can handle their emotional experience is just so sad. As an anxious person, it's so sad because we were never taught to just say it. Just say it how it is and it's going to be okay. Just tell us how you really feel. But no, it's not okay, because the times that they have let out their emotional experience, the person who they're sharing that experience with hasn't received it well. Because more often than not, those people don't have the emotional space to handle it. Through learning time and time again, the anxious person feels like the only way they're allowed to express their emotional experience is through the explosion. It's very complicated and tricky because up until the explosion, the anxious person doesn't feel like they're allowed to express. The only way they've been remotely heard or seen by the people that they've loved the most in their life is usually when they're in an explosion. What will happen is the relief from the explosion, and then the remorse and the shame sets in. Oh my God, I can't believe I said that. I can't believe I just lost it like that again. And they go into a shame spiral. The shame spiral is where the booze and the drugs come in. Booze and drugs also comes in to suppress because they don't want to feel their emotions. This is actually really complicated and deep, but I don't feel like anyone talks deeply about this. We just skirt along a lot of this stuff. The anxious person explodes and then gets relief, and then they go into shame and remorse. And for the anxious person, the shame and remorse is actually the most detrimental, because once they are in shame and remorse, that's when they backpedal and they're like, oh my God, I shouldn't have said that. Oh, I can't believe I behaved this way. And they are very self-deprecating. They put a lot of pressure and hang a lot of shit on themselves for speaking up, because now they're scared that they're not going to be loved or liked. So the person that they just lost their shit at will no longer like or love them. That is the worst emotional experience for an anxious person is, how do I smooth this over so that I can feel loved and liked again? The anxiety starts creeping in again. This nasty, evil cycle of emotional freedom because I let the lid off the pressure cooker, to how do I resolve this as fast as possible because I need to soothe this because I don't like how this feels. And now that I know they don't love or like me, how do I remedy this relationship because I care about it so much? And when we do that, we go into apology mode and we profusely apologize. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have said that. Oh, I'm totally wrong. No, it doesn't matter that the sock was on the carpet, and it doesn't matter that this, and it doesn't matter that. Yes, it matters. It matters so much. If it didn't matter, they wouldn't have brought it up. If it didn't matter, they wouldn't have exploded the way that they exploded. If it didn't matter, they wouldn't have suppressed the things that they'd been suppressing for as long as they'd been suppressing them. It 100% matters that you exploded. And it's not the explosion. It's not the sock on the floor. All the explosion is a release of pressure. If you're with an anxious person in a relationship and you don't allow space for accountability, responsibility, and repair, that anxious person is going to profusely apologize for their behavior in the shortest time possible. Why that is detrimental is because the moment they start to feel you are okay with their behavior, the anxiety starts creeping back in again, because the actual issue didn't get resolved. Why they were suppressing the emotional experiences to begin with hasn't actually been addressed. All that's been addressed is the explosion. A firecracker got released and nothing got resolved, because there's so much emotion on top of emotion by this stage. They don't actually know what they were pissed off at to begin with. But most likely it's an expectation that's been let down, or an expectation they had of you. Now they're feeling disrespected or like they don't matter to you. Usually it's this whole thing of people pleasing, the giving. Now they're on empty and you're just taking, they're giving and giving, and you give. And that's the dynamic that plays out, especially if you're in an anxious avoidant relationship. The anxious person will give and give and give, and the avoidant person will take and take. The avoidant person is happy in the taking because they're getting everything they need. They're comfortable, they're secure, they feel amazing. But the anxious person is like, why don't you love me the way that I'm loving you? Because the avoidant person doesn't have to love you the way you're loving them, because avoidant people aren't givers, they're takers. Avoidant people are happy in the taking. They actually don't have that much energy to give. Avoidant attachment is the most dangerous attachment because it can very closely be confused with security. They think they're secure, but they're not. They're actually being avoidant. They feel secure in the relationship because the anxious person is the one giving, pleasing, fighting, arguing. Like they're the ones that are really committed to the relationship. But the avoidant person doesn't have to commit because they feel secure and stable in the relationship, when the anxious person is the one always feeling like they have to prove themselves. And the anxious person is easily manipulated because they're so scared of being alone and unloved that they will do anything to not feel that way until they explode. Then they have the release, the emotional freedom for a brief moment, then the remorse and the shame kicks in. And the moment that they feel remorse and shame for their explosive behavior, that's when they can be manipulated. That's when they can be gaslit. That's when the deflection takes place. And that's when nothing gets resolved. And this is the toxicity between the anxious and the avoidant dynamic. Anxious person becomes a victim because they're like, how could you do this to me? Can't you see how much I give you? Can't you see how much I do for you? Why can't you give me the love back that I'm giving you? And the answer to that is there is no possible way that anyone can give that love and devotion back to you, because you can't give it back to yourself. You aren't devoted to yourself in the relationship. You are devoted to the other person. Essentially, anxious people love their partners more than they love themselves. And the more you love another person more than you love yourself, you will never, ever get back the love that you're giving out. It just can't happen, because the other person most likely loves themselves a little bit more than you love you, and they will preserve, they will hold back. They don't need to give you that love. They clearly see that you don't love and respect yourself enough to bring stuff up at the simmer phase, even at the boil phase. If you bring something up at a boil phase of your emotional experience, you're going to have way more control. You're going to be more articulate, concise, clear, calm, and collected. The avoidant person will be more willing to listen to what you have to say. I have also had relationships where, as I've become more secure in myself, I bring up stuff as it comes up. One of my pet peeves is being blamed for the emotional experience. Like, how dare I rock the boat? The avoidant person really doesn't like the boat being rocked. The anxious person doesn't like rocking the boat. When the boat is rocked, the avoidant person is like, how dare you rock the boat? How dare you create the discord? I'm great. I'm in cruise control. I feel secure in this relationship. And now you're rocking the boat, and I have to be responsible for your emotional experience, but you're the one rocking the boat. I was fine in my world, not giving a shit. And now you're bringing up that I have to give a shit? Fuck you. This is yours. This is your problem. I'm not responsible for your happiness. I'm not responsible for your orgasms. I'm not responsible for your emotional freedom. Like, that's on you. That's the avoidant mindset. Anxious. Oh my God, I don't want to rock the boat. I'm a peacekeeper. I don't want to do that. Oh my God, I can't help it. I can't help it. Oh my God, I've rocked the boat. Oh, feels so good to have rocked the boat. I can't believe I rocked the boat. Oh, I'm an idiot for rocking the boat. Oh no, I don't feel loved or liked. I can't believe it. Avoidant person. How dare you rock the boat? I was feeling great. I was feeling secure. If you don't feel secure in this relationship, then that's on you. If you don't feel stable in this relationship, then that's on you. You need to go do the work. I'm fine. I feel good. I'm good in this relationship. But if you don't feel good about it, you need to go do the work. That's tricky. That's a tricky dynamic. If you feel secure and stable in your relationship, partner is acting highly anxious, uncontrollably emotive in a way that you are saying to yourself, this behavior is a lot, too much, hard work, or crazy, then maybe you need to look at yourself and ask yourself, what is it in my actions and behavior that are eliciting this response from my partner who I love? What am I doing that's creating this response from my partner who I say I love? What part am I playing in this dynamic where my partner is clearly very anxious and I'm sitting here secure and stable? How is my behavior making that person behave in a way that looks crazy from where I'm standing, but I am feeling secure and stable? That is the number one takeaway that I've learned from myself as an avoidant person. For a lot of people, they don't actually know where their anxiety kicks in and where their avoidance kicks in. For me, I am very anxious at the beginning of a relationship because there's a lot of insecurity around if we're even in a relationship. Are we solid? Is it secure? Am I stable? There's a lot of unknowns, and anxious people don't like unknown behavior. We're not very good in the shaky ground. We need to feel stable and secure. So for me, the challenge is getting to the stability and security in the relationship. But here's the scary part for me is once I feel stable and secure, I then don't want to talk about things because I don't want to rock the boat. And that means that I do a lot of suppressing until I can't. And then that whole explosion thing happens, and then they can turn my emotional experience against me. And then I'm apologizing for all the things. And then what happens is me apologizing profusely over and over, time and time again, for the relationship dysfunction. Over time, I start to disconnect, and the avoidance is part of the disconnection. Once I start disconnecting, I don't want to have sex anymore. I don't want to talk about anything. I'm just floating on cruise control. And there's an element of security and stability in that. But I start taking things away from the relationship because I realize that my needs aren't important enough to the other person, taking responsibility and being accountable for their part in our relationship dysfunction. If I'm always doing that, then they're not growing. And then right at the end, when everything's falling apart, I'm like, why aren't you growing? Why aren't you growing? In this relationship, you haven't changed shit. I'm the one bending over backwards to accommodate everything, but you're not doing anything. You're not doing anything for it. And truth be told, it's because I haven't given it space. I apologized before they had a chance to sit in their shit and think about where and how they contributed to the dysfunction of our relationship. But the biggest issue with avoidance is they just really don't think there is a problem. They're like, you're making it up. They don't think that they have a problem. And then what happens is they have panic attacks. They've suppressed so much emotion that they go into panic attack mode. So that's still a form of anxiety because panic attack is an anxiety attack. They have so much suppressed emotion that their pressure cooker is internally shaking with so much vibration that they start to breathe shorter and sharper breaths. And they start to mimic a freaking heart attack. They mimic a heart attack. They feel like they're going to explode. One explosion is an outward explosion where the lid of the pressure cooker is lifted off with a volcano of emotion and force. The other is deep suppression of emotion where they never take the lid off the pressure cooker. And they internalize those emotions so much, so heavily, so deeply that they implode with an internal volcano. This deep resistance of emotional experience internally implodes so extremely that it mimics a heart attack. That's anxiety and that's avoidance. For anybody is interested in attachment theories, I would highly recommend reading this book called Attached by Emile Levine and Rachel S.F. Heller. This was the first book I've read about attachment theories and attachment styles, and it was such a huge aha moment for me. I'm going to leave it there and end this on saying that if you are aware that you have an anxious attachment or avoidant attachment, it's great that you have an awareness around it, but what are you doing about it? What are you doing to overcome your anxiety and what are you doing to overcome your avoidance? Because if you continue to be in an anxious state, if your survival mode is anxiety or your survival mode is avoidance, you aren't going to be coming into a relationship with healthy attachments. And it's okay to be entering into a relationship knowing that you're anxious and knowing that you're avoidant, but you need to be actively trying to overcome those attachments and wanting to become secure. And the only way to do that is through practice. It's through putting yourself in the firing line time and time again so that you can practice all the ways in which you can change your attachment style from anxious or avoidant to secure. Because I think at the end of the day, security is what we're all striving for. We're looking for it in other people, but we really need to find that within ourselves.